welcome to the Personal Side of Business podcast, where every business has a story. Today, we welcome Peter, who is a husband to wife Lisa for 25 years, father of four, full-time real estate broker and property management at Paracelsus Property with 21 years in the industry. In his free time, he enjoys flag football, surfing, playing bass, as well as creative outlets, which include fictional writing and stand-up comedy. Welcome, Peter.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jet. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So you're in actually two different spaces, right? Sort of in the same area. So you work with realty and you also do property management.
Correct.
How did you get into both of these sides?
So I kind of joke with people. I tell people I got into property management because I was young and stupid, which I think is actually a good thing because whenever you start a business, I think you have to have some sort of youth and that youthful energy because it can be very draining. And I think you have to be a little bit stupid because if you knew everything that owning a business entails, I think you'd probably never start a business.
How old were you when you got in?
So 27.
Wow.
So I was 27 when I started. I got into real estate in 2004, went straight into property management, second generation in the business. So my dad's still a real estate agent, broker associate with our company and still does real estate. I got into it with specifically for the purpose of doing property management.
Yeah. What was it about property management that enticed you? Was it the overall payout over time, or was there something about it that you loved that just doing the work, or both?
So kind of neither, but I'd say, first of all, I could see the potential for the income.
Yeah.
But secondly, I was young. I had one newborn. I had another one on the way, and I needed money. Yeah. And it really just made sense at the time for me to get into it. So I took over a small portfolio of about 20 properties that my dad had been managing as, a favor for clients. And we took that, incorporated Paracelsus Property Management, and he just handed the reins over and said, hey, you need to get this going. So our budget at the very beginning was very minimal because some of these accounts were freebies. Some of them were highly discounted. And I just kind of took it, ran with it, and started working it. During the first few years, I went back to school to get my bachelor's degree in business and used my company as kind of the guinea pig for a lot of the projects that we were doing for marketing, for advertising, for, procedures, for policies, all that kind of stuff. So it really kind of filled a couple of purposes. Yeah. And, but getting into it, I really didn't know exactly what all it would look like. Now we're 21 years later. And I remember thinking if I could just get 75 doors under management, 75, I would be set. I can just put it on cruise control. And then I got to 75 and then it was 100 because I couldn't do cruise control at 75. Yeah. And then it was 100. Then you got to scale. Then you got to hire, I hired my first employee after about 6 or 7 years. And then they went from part-time to full-time. And then it's a second employee. And then I've got to get outside book. It just kind of expands. It's a bureaucracy that expands. But the opportunities really got better and better because it helped me to really be familiar with the investment space and know exactly what people are looking for when they want to invest in real estate. They're looking, what's my rate of return? What's my cap rate? What's my ROI? What can we expect here versus other markets? Yeah. And it's really forced me to look at the numbers. And a lot of times I'll run numbers for people. Hey, if I've got X number of dollars put down, what is that going to buy me here? What's my rate of return going to be? And usually the rate of return is not great, but the appreciation potential is really good in San Diego. So if people are looking for cash flow, a lot of times they'll buy elsewhere. If they're looking to stay close to home, some people want to own rental property by where they live because they don't like the idea of not being able to drive by it and see it. So we've worked with a whole bunch of different clients, a lot of military that were relocating. They're not sure if they're coming back to San Diego, but they know if they come back in 5 or 10 years, they probably won't be able to afford to live here. So they want to keep their property. So it just kind of grew. We grew by word of mouth, a lot of referral-based business through clients. And then we started gaining traction. We get a lot of referrals from other real estate agents. I manage property for other real estate agents. they could manage it themselves, but they know what kind of headache it can be.
Yeah.
So they have us do it. So really, we've just started kind of branching out, and we're at about 280 doors under management now.
Wow.
And I've got several full-time employees, several part-time employees, offsite employees, and really just trying to scale it to make sense and bring value, gain value for our clients.
Where did you feel like there was a point after you got to, I don't know, let's say 150 doors that you were like, this, if I decided to do this by myself, I could probably cruise through? Or is there, what's that threshold that you felt like I could probably stay with this and live with this? Or is it never ending? You're just going to keep going
Well, I
forward?
think a lot of it has to do with quality of life. Like
Okay.
if you don't have anybody working for you, you can't go on vacation.
Yeah.
And when you've got young kids that want to go out and do stuff, and you've got, a wife that doesn't want to stay at home, 24/7 and just not ever go anywhere, that you have to find a way to remove yourself from the equation. I think that's a struggle that a lot of business owners have,
Yeah.
is finding a way to be able to step back without the business falling apart.
Right. Right.
And so it got to the point where I was forced to scale so that I could have somebody, as a backup. And that's just kind of, blossomed and mushroomed from there.
Can you talk about that plan to scale? Did you sit down and write it out and
Mhm.
say, this is what needs to happen, or I have to hit these numbers in order to hire someone? I hire someone, then this happens. Like, tell me through that process.
So I did. Yeah, I went through all of that, and it's all hypotheticals. And as a business owner, you think this is how it's got to be, but then when reality hits, it's usually very different. And I don't remember I want to say it was Roosevelt, probably somebody really smart, that said the in reference to, I think it was World War II, the plans were worthless, but the planning was priceless, or something to that effect. And that's really what it comes down to, is you got to have some sort of foundation or basis, some sort of game plan to go off of. So I can look back at that and I can say, okay, well, this is where I messed up. This is where I need to make a correction. My next hire should be in this space at this rate, at this, it's given me a little bit more direction, because hiring that first employee is a big deal. Because you don't always have the cash flow to do it. You're kind of go out there on a whim, saying, well, if I get them hired, I should have the free time now to go and
Yeah.
build the business more. But if that doesn't happen, then what do you do? And so scaling to the first employee was really a big step. Getting to the second and third felt a little bit more natural in its evolution. But again, it's really, as a business owner, it's always kind of stepping out into the unknown.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a scary part about hiring the first employee, because you're giving trust into something. And then I would assume it's like after having your first kid, right? You're like, okay, cool. Everyone live. I'm just going to keep moving to next one. But for you, were there certain key elements in the first employee that you were looking for?
so yes, but I probably could have done better in the looking part. I think the result was great.
Yeah.
The person I hired was fantastic. She was great, filled the void that I needed at that time.
Yeah.
The struggle with scaling a business is when you hire your first employee, you have their rule or their scope of work that they
Yeah.
have to do. But then as the business builds and develops, that scope of work has to change. And so sometimes that employee can shift over and do, a new set of tasks, a new set of jobs, and sometimes they can't. So really, I think the biggest thing was hiring somebody that could be flexible in getting the things done that needed to be done. It wasn't a rigid, I'm only here for admin, answering phones, showing property. It's these are the main things, and then down the line, this is probably what else is going to come down. And that's how it's been for every employee. I mean, pretty much it's the roles evolve and they change because the needs change. So hiring somebody that can handle that evolution process is really key, because you don't want to get stuck with somebody that doesn't know how to shift gears
Yeah.
when the gears need to be shifted.
Would you rather have someone that was uh, the ability to be fluid than someone who knew everything? Like, what percentage you feel like favors into which side?
When it comes to hiring your first few, I'd say you definitely want someone that can handle just about anything. You don't always want that perfectionist in one area, because that may limit you. You want someone, for me, I wanted somebody that could get the things done that I wasn't good at.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, being a business owner, you think, well, I can do everything great. I can do this. I can, and maybe you can, but you probably can't. You just don't know
Yeah.
it. So being able to realize what your shortcomings are and also what you don't want to do, what you're not good at, is really a critical thing, because somebody else can do a task that you don't like so much better and with so much more enthusiasm. Why not give them the satisfaction of doing something they like to do that you don't like to do?
Did you make a list of things that you were like, this is where
I did.
I'm not doing well in?
Yeah, I did. And again, we don't always know what we don't know about ourselves, but I did, I put the list of things that I didn't like doing, or I didn't think I was 100% proficient at, or things that I wanted to make sure somebody else could do. And I went with that. When I hired my other full-time manager a year and a half ago, I went through maybe 100 resumes and just kind of whittled it down. I said, these are the specific skills that I need to have. If you don't have these skills, it doesn't matter. And that process, I think, was a little bit easier. Hiring the second full-time person was, to me, a lot easier than hiring the first. Maybe it's because I'd been there and done that. Maybe the business is just in a different spot. It wasn't as much of a do or die. It was, okay, this person, they can get this set of things done.
Because maybe after the first employee, the business became a little more stable in that sense, right? That you're like, oh, I have some time to myself to be able to do what I need to, and someone else is picking up the slack that I couldn't do myself. I don't know.
For sure, yeah. Finding something that can complement you in that, and that can, take that workload off. And I think that's really where I did well in my first couple of hires. My first full-time assistant worked for me for about, 3-4 years. Her husband was military, so they were here. Great, friend of the family, just did a great job. And then when they went to move, I was stuck with, well, shoot, what do I do now? There's no way I can go back to doing everything myself. There's absolutely no way. And so when I brought on the next employee, my next full-time employee, I think I really got lucky with somebody that was, number one, motivated to work, motivated to get stuff done, and really wanted to contribute, and was genuinely seemed to have an interest in the field. Came in with hardly any experience, but had the desire and had the intangibles. And when you hire your first person, it could be a great move or it could be a complete flop. And luckily, I think I made a good decision on this one, which made it a lot easier down the road.
And when you're doing that hiring process, do you feel like over time, as you're hiring the second, third person, that you can see the business start to you're like, maybe I can keep hiring, and I can the more I hire, the more I back off. Is there a sense of that?
Theoretically, yes. So I keep every month I go through my tasks and what I do, and I say, what can I get rid of, or what can I offload to somebody else? What can somebody else do faster, more efficiently, or better than me? And there's always stuff that I can offload. And I would love to get to the point where I'm 100% working on the business and not, in the business per se. In reality, I don't know if it's a personality defect that I have, but I really have a hard time stepping away and delegating a bunch of stuff out. And that's one thing that, being a business owner has helped me with. It's just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. And, I think a lot of business owners do go into it, especially solopreneurs, and they're like, well, I can do this. I can do the accounting. I can do the inventory. I can do the sales. Well, yeah, you can, but maybe you shouldn't.
Right. And is that the best use of your time?
Is that the best use? Exactly. And, and so in the process of owning a business, I've really come to know what fuels me and what drains me. And so I'm trying to offload those things that drain me and might fuel somebody else. But again, it's hypothetically, it all makes sense. But in reality, when it's not always the easiest transition to make.
Yeah. And let's walk through an average day in property management. What does that look like?
Number one, there is no average day. So like this last Monday, I came in and we're already dealing with a water leak to another unit down below ours that involved another property management company, another tenant, another property owner. So we've got, between us, our tenant, our owner, and them, and our contractor, you got seven different relationships that you're trying to manage.
Yeah.
And then I came in Monday, we had another leak at another property. And then we had a flood at another property. And just like Mondays usually are the day where everybody waits until Monday morning. And about 7:45, 8 o'clock, my phone just starts ringing. And the texts come in and the phone calls come in. And it's just putting out fires, usually metaphorically fires, throughout the day. And then sometimes by Tuesday, I can sit back and go, okay, what is it I need to get done? But a lot of it, I have a weekly meeting with my staff, with my team. Hey, what are the properties we have on the market? Where are they at? Where are our lease renewals at? What can we do better? What are things that we can improve on, process wise, procedure wise? But average day, I mean, it's a mix of, it's just solving problems.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of solving problems. And I think the biggest key to that as an owner is, in the service industry, I think you get paid proportional to how well you can solve problems. If you can't solve a problem, you're going to be out of business. And solving those problems and taking those on, but without taking them in a personal way, like people, there's people on all sides of all spectrums, from personality to friendliness to whatever, and really trying to work with people from all these different sets, and trying to mesh well with them, and knowing that they're coming from a space of, I need this, I need this, I need this. And it's not, if we take it personally, it would crush anybody. But knowing that, okay, I'm here to solve the problem, and I'm here to empower my team and them and come to a resolution that hopefully everybody's happy with. I think that's probably the most of my days, is just solving problems. And every once in a while I get to work with really cool people.
Yeah.
So
is there something you've done differently over the years that has made that Monday morning a little bit easier?
So a couple of key hires. So yeah, I'd say it's a mix of getting the right people, doing, offloading some of those responsibilities. One of the things I did about a year ago is, well, not quite a year ago, I hired a full-time remote assistant.
Oh, nice.
And he handles all of the maintenance issues and problems that come up. I am not good with that, because it gets to be so tedious, because you're, in the case of this other leak that we had, when you're managing 7 different relationships and you're trying to run a business and you've got problems coming, it becomes a lot. I call it death by 1,000 paper cuts. Yeah. It's like, it's not any one thing.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of little things. Yeah. And I found that was something that really drained me.
Now, when you're saying relationships, are you talking about like the different vendors that you use?
Different vendors, our owners, our tenants, other people affected. Yeah. And some people are great to work with, and it brings me energy. And some people really just pull that energy out of me. So, really trying to see, the other part of that is, who do I want to do business with?
Yeah. Right.
One thing I've learned is I don't want to do business with everybody.
Yeah.
I don't want to earn all the business out there. There are people out there that would work great with me and not well with somebody else, and vice versa. There's plenty of business out there. But what can I do to really find and attract people that share the same kind of values, the same, I'd even say temperament?
Yeah.
Is really key to, I think, setting up the long run, where work isn't a drag to come into every day, because, at least some of the people you work with are really cool people.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that comes with longevity in a field, right? Like, I think when you're young and you're opening your business or whatever it is, whatever field you're in, you kind of just need to take everyone, because you're like, I need to make money. And then over time, you're like, okay, I'm doing well enough that I can turn away people. And I think that's one of the great things about staying in an industry for a while. When you're transitioning from, let's just say, from the realtor side to the property management side, what are some of the things that you're looking for in a property that's different? Or is it when you're trying to sell or buy a place for a client, you're looking for this, but these are things you're looking for property management?
Great question. So when it comes to, on the real estate side, a lot of times people are looking for, there is a lot of overlap, number one.
Yeah.
But from a rental standpoint, a lot of it is a little bit more utilitarian. It's, how can this property help me for the next year or 2 or 3? And a lot of that is, what are the schools? What are the amenities in the area? What's the proximity to work? And what's the budget? Um, some when you're looking to rent, it's not a long-term, probably won't be a long-term relationship. So, if people have to make concessions on, well, I can't afford the house that I want in the area I want, so I'll take the area and take a smaller house. I can take that hit for a year or 2 or 3. So, it might be a house, maybe not in the best location on the street per se. Good area, but maybe it's got a little bit more road noise. Maybe it doesn't have the view. Maybe, there's just different aspects to it. Whereas on the resale side, when someone's buying, they're looking at a lot of the specifics. Is what sets this house apart? How am I going to enjoy it long term? Can I have my family grow in it? Whereas with the rental, it's like, well, we outgrow it, then we'll find something else.
Yeah.
Whereas if you buy something, it's much more of a long-term commitment. There's bigger implications. And I think that for rentals also, most people can if it doesn't have the exact countertops they want, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have the perfect flooring, it's not the end of the world. If it has all that, it helps. Whereas on the resale side, people are looking at those types of things. And if it doesn't have it, well, now I've got to, now I got to spend $5,000 or $10,000 to get it the way I want it. And it turns into a deeper exercise.
Yeah, having a rental property, I've always felt was you have to let go of that
Yes.
emotion to it. You're just like, if it gets the job done, it's great. Like I'm not looking for all these things, but coming from a primary residence buyer from the first time, it took me a few months to get rid of that thought. Like, this is not my home. I'm just renting it out. Um, when people are going through this process in, let's say, San Diego, especially San Diego, which is it's a higher price point. How do you walk them through that this is the investment for long term, right? Because they're probably not going to be making money for a while.
It's very possible, yeah. So I want to set the right expectations up front. And part of that is letting them know, hey, you raised your family here, or, your kids took their first step right over there in the living room. That's not the case for anybody else that's coming in here to rent it. To be blunt, they don't care. They're here, to live, and, those memories that you had, take them with you. In fact, I was just looking at a property the other day for someone that's going to be renting it out, and they had the height markers on the door jamb of their kids as they grew. It's when they're 10 and this when they're 12, and I said, "Do you want to take that with you? Because I'm going to paint over it." And they're like, "Yeah, we're planning to take that out." I'm like, "Okay, good." But yeah, really letting them know when it's a rental, it's a business. So number one, don't get manipulated by people who want to come in, because there are people living in properties that will take advantage of property owners, and vice versa. But I do see a lot of the manipulation of landlords by residents that, they felt sorry for them, so they rented the property, and now, it's been 6 months and they're not paying rent, and it's been 10 months and they're not paying rent, and the property's trashed, and they didn't start out well. So really letting owners know it's a business. We need to run it like a business. And that resonates with most people. And I pretty bluntly, I'll tell them, if you don't see that as a possibility, you probably want to sell the property. Yeah. If you come in, if there's a chance you're going to walk in 5 years later and it needs a lot of work and that's going to devastate you, you probably don't want to have this as a rental property. And that's okay. Everyone's in different places, and that's fine. But it's a numbers game. So yeah, if they've owned it for 2-3 years, the cash flow probably is going to be terrible. It very well could be negative. But we do chart through, and we can show them on a spreadsheet, hey, assuming a 3% annual increase, your bottom line number may be negative $300 a month, $400 a month. However, maybe year 2, year 2.5, you're at break even, because it's not just the monthly cash flow that we look at. It's the overall investment. What's the appreciation of the property looking at? What's the principal buy down? If they've got a loan on it, a chunk of that money that they're paying, anywhere from 30 to 45% of that is principal going back into the equity of the property. And so when you take all of that into consideration, and if their plan is to keep it for 10 years, especially, they could be doing very well, after year 3, 4, 5. And it's much easier to leverage that towards the end. And kind of see those numbers. And again, the planning wise, that's all hypothetical. We don't know how it's going to plan, how it's going to pan out. Rents may go stagnant for 2 years, or they may, during COVID, they went up 10 to 15% a year on average from 2020 through 2023. I didn't expect it to go up that much. But when you at least have something to base an expectation on, you can decide, okay, well, there is a risk it's not going to go that way. Is the risk worth it? It's all a risk assessment. Yeah. And if if someone needs cash flow, probably not a great spot for them. They may want to, they might try it out. And if it doesn't work, maybe they do a 1031 exchange, sell it here, buy somewhere else where they have better cash flow, but maybe not the same appreciation. Yeah. Or if somebody's not going to need the money for a long time, let it sit here. Let it get that 5 to 10% annual appreciation, because, over 7 years, it's going to double. Rule of 72. It could, if it goes up every 7% a year, it's going to double after 10 years. On an entry level $800,000 property house, it's 1.6 in 7 years. That's not a bad. Yeah. That's not a bad return on investment. Yeah. When you start looking at it, other than just, well, it's going to take me 3 years to break even. Yeah, but if you can, it's going to suck for the first few years. But if you can get past that, then a lot of opportunities open up.
Do you think people that are on the fence about renting out their homes, do you think they're still trying to figure out if they can make that space, or is it just the business mindset, or both, that they're just not into yet?
It's a little bit of both, especially if it's their first time renting a property out. You don't really know something until you've been there. Yeah. And so I tell them up front, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of things that you don't even know that you don't know. But I will do my best to kind of pilot you through the situation, let you know what to be on the lookout for, and really try to educate them, because I don't want them coming back to me and being surprised. I'd rather turn down the business up front and not have them, devastated in the long run. But at the same time, there is so much great potential out there. The obstacles, whether that be, there's always risk whenever you rent it out. There's rules and regulations and laws and government interference, if you want to call it that, that can make it difficult, that can increase the risk assessment of renting out a property. But then when you have that chart, and you can look at the whole picture and not just say, well, I could lose, they could trash the house and I'd be out $10,000, $20,000, as opposed to looking at it in the long run saying, this could make me $1 million in 10 years. Yeah. I mean, this could legitimately make me 7 figures. It puts things into perspective. And yes, there is risk, but it is more of a short-term risk. Yeah. And I think that most people will develop that business mindset if they're given that prompting to do it. If they're given that, hey, you've got to look at it as business, as opposed to, a lot of salespeople, they're always trying to manipulate and pull on pull the emotions. And my approach is exactly the opposite. Maybe not super sterile or cold, but hey, these are the numbers. This is the risk. There's always going to be a risk, but maybe it's worth it. And depending on what your goals are, this could be a great opportunity for you, or maybe this isn't the right thing. But I'd rather have them know that up front and make sure they know. And I always tell them, make sure you talk to your tax person. You don't have a tax person, you need to talk to a tax person. You need to get all the implications laid out so that you know what you're getting into. Yeah.
And for someone that's trying to do this on their own instead of hiring a property manager, what's your advice for them? Because I think one of the main things, I think it's especially in California, is I feel like a lot of the rules protect the tenants more, right? And as an owner, you're probably having to deal with a lot of legalities that you're like, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, so a lot of people do start out doing it on their own, and a lot of times it goes fine because if you have goodwill
Yeah.
and good faith on both sides, it can work out fine. The problem is when it becomes an issue, it's too late to do anything about
Yeah.
it because there are, there's ordinances in Chula Vista, in San Diego, in Imperial Beach, and if they're not addressed at the onset of the lease, then the owner could be really set up for problems down the road.
Like something that comes to mind that would be like something that if I were to manage by myself, there's a good chance I might just bypass that and not really deal with it.
Great question. So if you have a property, say City of San Diego, and since it's a single family home, it could be a house or a condo, attached, detached, whatever. But if you own it as an owner, it's considered a single family residence. You can exclude it from the San Diego Tenant Protection Ordinance, but it's only excluded if you have that written exclusion in the lease agreement, word for word, symbol for symbol, citing the civil code, everything. And if you don't have that and you want to go move back into your property, you may not be able to.
Wow.
Or if you're lucky and you're able to move them out, you might be paying a 2 to 3 month relocation allowance based on, whatever the lease agreement or fair market value, depending on what city you're in. So you might be paying a tenant $10 or $15 or $20,000 to move out of the property that you're going to move back into that you own.
Wow.
And unfortunately, a lot of these rules are set up because there's some scumbag people out there that really take advantage of laws. And from a state side, from the state angle, it's all against the law.
Yeah.
But for the state district attorney to come in and prosecute, it's not likely.
Yeah.
Because typically it looks big to us in the, locally, but in the big picture of California where there's 30, 40 million people, it's not a big deal. So these cities will pass these ordinances so they have authorization to then go out and get these people that are, doing what they're not supposed to do.
Does the city send out letters or notices to property owners about these ordinances? How do you find out?
You're in the know. If you don't, there's not anything that goes out that I'm aware of. I've never seen anything go out for any of these 3 cities that we talked about. It's if you're a landlord, you should know these things. That's kind of the assumption. And if you don't know these things and you're a landlord, then you obviously are financially well off enough to where it shouldn't bother you that you have to pay $20,000 to move someone else out of the property, which is a weird assumption to make.
Yeah.
Especially because a majority of the single family properties are owned by, what they call the small mom and pop shops. People own 1 or 2 or 3 rental properties. They're not rich people. I mean, that's all a relative term, but they rely on the income from those rentals to pay the taxes, to pay the maintenance of the property, to fund their retirement. It's not so that they can go have a beach house in Cabo or, go vacation 24/7. It's a business for them. And so it can be frustrating dealing with those types of things. And if somebody's not aware of all those things up front, they could really be setting themselves up. And then, if you don't give proper notice to move somebody out, you could be sitting on top of you could be subject to a lawsuit, and that could be costing the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the rules have made it a lot easier to criminalize landlords for what I believe is not criminal act.
Yeah.
So, So if landlords don't know about that, you're not going to go onto LegalZoom and find a lease that has a San Diego exemption on it. You're not going to go onto Zillow and find a lease agreement that exempts it from the City of Chula Vista Tenant Protection Ordinance.
Right.
Most cases won't exclude it from the statewide Tenant Protection Act. And there's a lot of misinformation about that because single family homes are treated differently than multifamily, like apartments. There's different rules, there's different regulations. And so there's a lot of nuance to the business. And if somebody isn't aware of that, they could really be, setting themselves up for a big problem.
How often do you keep up with all these ordinances?
All the time.
What's your methods or where do you go to keep up with it?
Honestly, I network with some of the top property managers in the area. I have monthly meetings that I go to that go over all of these legal updates. I'm subscribed to several other agencies that are there to make us aware of these things. I was there when they first started trying to figure out the Chula Vista tenant protection ordinance. And that was kind of a nightmare, but, it's just being involved in the community and being involved and trying to stay in the know, working with people and leaders within the industry. And as much as you may not like the position or stance of the person opposite you, being able to have um, the discipline to be able to maintain a relationship with that person. And we all come from different backgrounds and different expectations and all that kind of stuff. But being able to have constructive conversations with people in that space. But a lot of it is, it's
there's no like website that you can go to check on all this. Like they're just like, hey, this is Monday morning. These are all the ordinances that come out. Is there anything like that?
Usually we get a little bit of a heads up before they come out. It's like, hey, the Imperial Beach one, they heard for probably 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
And that was a pretty quick turnaround process. Chula Vista was probably close to 8 or 10 months. So we get wind of these things. We kind of know what to expect. We do what we can to help influence that in a positive way that we think works best for everybody. And then, just sometimes it's just who you know and being in the space. And that's my job, is to know all of this stuff and to make people aware. And if people are out there trying to do things on their own, it might go fine. But I run into so many situations where it's got really bad. And sometimes it's to the point where there isn't anything they can do about it besides call an attorney, spend thousands of dollars, and see if there's a way to move the person out. But ideally, catching it before that is good. But the most ideal is setting it up correctly at the very beginning. And sometimes that's hubris that makes people think, oh, I know what I'm doing. I can do it myself. Well, maybe you can, but it doesn't mean you should. So.
And then, it sounds like, between trying to keep up with the properties, keep up with the ordinances, and then running the business, what is that like on your personal side? My question would be in 2 different instances, right?
Okay.
When you were younger, starting out the business, less of a family, I feel like you could probably put more energy into it. But now that you have kids, wife, how does that look like?
I'd say a lot of it probably is age more than the kids. When I first started doing this, I definitely had a lot more energy, and I could do 12, 14-hour days, on end, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Now I'm trying to do everything I can to keep it to an 8, maybe a 9-hour day. It's usually closer to 10, but trying to really conserve my energy. It's not just time management, it's the energy management aspect of it. But you can only do that if you have good systems and processes set up and people to run those. It's definitely evolved over time, but it's been a process for sure.
And has your family understood the nuances of the business?
I think they've grown to know it. Yeah. They've only known, my kids have only known me in the real estate space. They haven't known me before that when I owned a business, when I was in sales, when I worked at Legoland. They didn't know me in that kind of space. They know me as a real estate agent, as a real estate broker, as a property manager, as someone who is just dealing with stuff 24/7. And I try to point out, when we're able to go out, we're able to go on vacation. Hey, we're able to do this because, I have that flexibility, but that comes at the cost of sometimes I get those 2:00 in the morning calls when properties are flooded, or I get the call at 8:00 at night when the property's on fire, and we have to deal with that. And welcome to life. That's part of being an adult too.
Did you see that from your side growing up, that it was chaotic at any given time?
I had no clue what to expect on this because I saw, my dad got into real estate when I was probably about 12. And I didn't get a great background on real estate until I started working for him in high school. I did transaction coordination form, which is a fancy way of saying I just dealt with paperwork. And I didn't see all of the ins and outs and the relationship side of it or the problem solving side of it, and certainly not on the property management side of anything. So I just kind of went into it, like I said, kind of young, dumb, blind, ignorant. And had I known everything, maybe I would have thought twice or three times about getting into it. But it's definitely been a great way to learn.
Yeah. Do you think your kids, after seeing what you go through, would get into it?
Absolutely not.
I mean, is there a point where the financial side of it is worth it for, let's say, someone coming in? Like, if you were to tell them, you're getting into this. This is what you can expect until you hit this point, and then this makes sense.
So what I normally tell people is I talk to a lot of real estate agents that say, well, I'm going to get into property management because it's passive income.
Yeah.
There's nothing passive about the income. Nothing passive. Maybe they got lucky and worked with somebody and everything went perfect and they think, oh, it's a free extra few $100s a month or whatever. But usually to scale it, to have the processes, to have the software, to have, the technological backbone of everything, minimum 50, 60, 70 doors.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're getting to the point where it becomes a full-time job. And then it probably makes sense to the next step is you've got to hire an assistant. And then you got to get up to 100 doors or 110 or 20 or whatever to be able to pay that assistant and pay you. And so it starts to become kind of a game of chase on where the break even is at. And there's different structures for, cost structures. There's different revenue structures, different revenue streams that companies use. I've chosen to keep things pretty simple. I'm not a nickel and dime type of person, but there are companies out there that make money on the management fee. They make money on repairs. They make money on renewals. They make money on all kinds of things. But from a consumer standpoint, they see I'm getting nickel and dimed. I'm getting nickel and dimed. And pretty soon they call me and they say, hey, I'm getting nickel and dimed. What can you do? And then that's a new client of ours. So I try to keep the optics very, very simple. But other people, they thrive very well with that, with doing cost structures or things like that. So really there's more than one way to do anything.
Yeah.
It's finding what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your client base, and what can you do to bring value to the client that justifies that.
And the different populations that you work with, like you had mentioned, in service, if they're in, military and they need to, take off and they're renting the house, they don't want to lose a house. Is that a different type of management than someone who lives here in San Diego?
It depends more on the person than I'd say that their situations. I have some owners that live right down the street from their property. I have some owners that live on the other side of the world. They're military, they're deployed, they're Japan, Guam, Germany. I've had customs and border protection clients in Iceland. I've had them in Aruba. I've had them all over the place. But mostly it comes down to they want us to take care of their investment. And that's kind of an across the board type of thing, whether they live local or they're out of state or out of country. Usually they just want to make sure that they can come back to their home. Yeah. And sometimes they've had property management experience with other properties, whether that be in California or East Coast or Midwest. So sometimes I've got to reset their expectations to this is what it looks like right now in San Diego. This is not 10 years ago, Virginia. This is not 20 years ago, Florida. This is not right now, Texas. This is what is happening right now in San Diego and what can you expect? And setting those expectations up front, I think is really key for making sure the client's happy long-term.
And how many people pursue renting out the home on one side, just renting it out because they don't want to sell their home, against the side that they want to make money? Do you start to see people that are kind of far on each side, and like, I don't care about the money as much. I just don't want to sell the home. And or some people coming in as, I don't care what's going on. I just want to make money from this.
I think most people that I talk to come in with the expectation, long term, I want to make money.
Yeah.
Some of them are short term, I want to make money. I don't get a lot of, I just want to hold on to the property. I do have some clients like that. And then when you get into those situations, a lot of it becomes emotional attachments. And so there may be issues down the road when, hey, we need to do a major remodel, or, somebody didn't clean it right when they left. So, but I'd say the majority of the people that I work with are seeing it more as what's this going to do for me long term.
Okay.
And then sometimes they'll be like, well, let's try it for a year, or let's try it for 2 years, and we'll see. And if we keep it as a primary residence for, at least 2 of the last 5 years, maybe we can avoid those capital gains taxes when we sell it. So let's evaluate after year 1 or year 2 and see. It's really a little mix of everything, but,
And close out, if you were to have someone getting into the property management, realty, what advice would you give to them?
get a degree in psychology, because you're going to work with all kinds of people. You're going to work with a couple sociopaths. You're going to work with wonderful people also, but you need to know not just how other people think, not because you need to manipulate them, but because you need to understand them so that you can best help them. And you need to have an emotional intelligence that allows you to know you, and to, be able to know other people as well on a deeper level, on a psychological level, on, they're saying this, but they mean this. And then what can we do to help them get what they need when they don't know how to voice what they need? Right. So if I could do it over differently, I'd get a degree in psychology.
That's
for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. That's amazing. All right. Thank you, Peter. Where can people find you?
So our website is www.praehomes.com, PRAEHOMES. Always, you can contact me directly from the website. I'm not super hard to find. You can Google me. You can pretty much anywhere. I'm trolling on Facebook and social media all the time. So, I'd love to have conversations with people, even if they don't turn out to be clients. I'd love to at least make sure people are more informed on the subject.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for listening.